You made it to level 2, deeper questions leading to deeper answers. I'm Tomas Garza, and I'm here to help you decide to transform. I'll be setting the pace for the process to support your unfolding. Learn and commit to a practice that brings simplicity and then awareness of what is ready to be released. Join me now and allow the experience of a deeper sense of love. Hello and welcome to Decide to Transform. I'm your host, Tomas Garza, and as always, we have a very dynamic and very special show in store for you today. I've been looking forward to this one for quite some time. My guest today is Dylan Hunter Olson, who joins us from Boise, Idaho. And Dylan, I'm going to read your bio here for everybody. This is going to be a show that's revealing and takes us through a lot of transformation, and this is what Dylan is all about. So Dylan Hunter Olson is an independent singer, songwriter, mentor, transformational teacher, and writer based out of Boise, Idaho. He is involved with the International Academy of Universal Self-Mastery, or IAWESOME, as a teacher and a council member, an instructor at the Mastery Academy for the Musical and Technological Arts, a writer for the Zine, and a DJ at a local establishment. After struggling for many years with drug addiction and alcohol abuse, he had a series of experiences that served as his awakening and went through a massive transformation that made his life an inspiration to all those who meet and know him. And he strives to share his story and mission with the whole of humanity through the languages of music, writing, speech, comedy, and love. Dylan, welcome to Decide to Transform.
Thank you, Tomas. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is. It's a pleasure to have you. And there's so much here. Guys listening out there, wherever you are, we've been talking about this show appearance for quite some time. And we have known that we'll easily fill an hour of time. So I hope that, absolutely. And commercial free at this point, by the way. So yeah, right. So I hope that you're in for a really, really fun ride. So Dylan, I've been dying to ask you several things about your transformational work here. So, would you mind taking us through what exactly that entails?
Yeah. So in the past, a lot of my work, I guess to give it context, when I first started getting into transformational work, I was exposed to, which I explained to you in one of our earlier conversations about the New Masculine program that I did a workshop in. And there was a lot of shadow work and really intensive journaling, really intense community and brotherhood between men. And so that really is what sparked it.
Okay.
But I feel like a lot of my approach, it's very simple, but very radical in the sense that I just like to promote radical self-honesty and really I don't really have like any seminars or workshops. It's more of how I interact in my relationships and how I interact just in my everyday life and kind of how I choose to show up in the way of, you might find yourself with an acquaintance or a stranger even, and you find yourself in this conversation and all of a sudden you notice yourself at this fork in the road where you could do what you always do, which is maybe shrug off their comment or you dismiss what they say, or even though what they're saying is out of alignment with who you are and your truth. So there's that fork in the road where you could do that, or you could do what's in alignment with your higher self and your truth and choose to be naked and communicate. And so that's really the road that I try to do is, and I experience it a lot being a DJ at a bar, where especially even in the past 3 months, my personal evolution and transformation has just expanded exponentially. And so I find myself in these conversations in this very low vibrational environment, because being and honestly, that's one of my gripes with it is that I'm facilitating a space where people are escaping their lives and calling it celebration.
Okay,
And
sure.
yeah, and so
Yeah.
but I find myself at this place often where I'm having this discourse with people, and I can either choose to validate their pain and affirm it and feed into it, or I can propose different questions, and I can always provide love, unconditional love. And so I've kind of just taken it upon myself to, for myself, to live out of this higher vibration. And I've just noticed very rapidly and radically how it is transforming my reality and the realities of those around me.
Yes. And this is something very interesting that I want to ask you about because in the last 3 months, there have been a number of people that I know personally that I'm connected to personally, whether it's a work associate, a colleague, or a friend, or someone else who has said that they've had massive, I mean, literally massive transformation in their lives. And they have often said to me that they wake up one day a very different person than they were the night
Mm,
before when they went to bed. Now, does that speak to your experience as well?
yeah, I would say so. And yeah, it keeps changing form. It's almost like and
Yeah.
I mean, because there are some awakenings that happen from tragic events, and that was certainly with sobriety what it was, because it was this series of tragic events that really, but something clicked. It was like just
Mhm.
there was this clicking where all of a sudden it was like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm not doing that anymore. Like that doesn't make any sense. But then certainly over the past few months, it was like, yeah, there's just some moments where all of a sudden, and I actually was talking with a friend recently, and I was like, yeah, it's like crazy how like evolving beyond the ego in a way that is indefinable. And so I'll notice in my own self-awareness, my ego kind of like scrambling, trying to define what is going on within these mental constructs, but it's like beyond, but it can't, because I'm moving beyond those limits and those boundaries within my own consciousness, where and there'll just be moments where all of a sudden I'll notice things that before I totally tolerated in people's behavior and things that people say to me and things that I receive into my energy field. And now all of a sudden I'm just like, yeah, no, that doesn't work for me. That doesn't work for me. And I'll just like, I have no problem calling people out on it and
Right.
holding my ground, and not in a place of like, I'm holding my ground, I'm coming at you. It's like, it's like,
Yes.
hey man, like I love myself and I hold myself to this standard. And as such, I know that you're capable of this too. So why don't we try and meet there?
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, which is a radically different perspective than the way all of us are raised,
Yeah.
almost
Oh,
everybody.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so now, had this been happening prior to the last 3 months, or has that just been an acceleration in your experience?
I think this past few months was definitely an acceleration.
Okay.
I've been on this spiritual journey for probably close to 10 years, at least 7 or 8 years, is
Okay.
when I started really opening up myself to um, different philosophies. And because it started off with a curiosity in Eastern philosophy, diving into Buddhism, Hinduism,
Right.
Taoism, and but at first I was just kind of dipping my toes. I was just kind of playing in the water. I wasn't diving in. I was, just kind of testing it out. And I actually grew up uh, Christian.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
but it was on my own accord. My family didn't really go to church. I think I found a sense of refuge in the community there, growing up.
Hmm.
Uh, and so, but then it's like that. A lot of things started sticking out to me where I was like, this doesn't sit right with me. Like there are just some things, and it wasn't even the faith necessarily. It was more attributed to the practice and how it was applied by humans. Um, and so, but I kind of dipped my toes in it, and then my massive awakening occurred about a year. It was a little over a year ago,
Okay. Hmm.
and that was when I got sober. So I got a
Yeah.
DUI, and I was leaving work, and because I was DJing at a bar, and I remember my emotional state that day. I was in a like, I don't give a crap, like I'm gonna whatever happens happens. So
All
I
right.
drank
Yeah.
and I got pulled over, and but
Okay.
it was and I continued that behavior of still drinking, still partying, still hanging out with the same people for about a month. And then I had this experience with a relationship I was in where um, I found myself again at that fork in the road of like, am I going to choose to do this? Like, am I going to choose to lie? And because basically what had happened is my partner at the time, she had made some choices that made me feel insecure.
Okay. Yeah.
And me, being a mature adult male, decided it would be a great idea to go drink and do a lot of cocaine. And I ended up sleeping with somebody else. So I found
Wow.
myself at this fork in the road where I was like, I can either lie and try to preserve the relationship, or I can have integrity and I can tell the truth to her, like tell her the truth,
Right.
and not have these barriers around my heart. Because if I take this road, I know that I will have barriers around my heart, and that will make it harder for me to be intimate. That'll make it harder for me to love myself. So I chose integrity, and that was really a big moment where I chose that, and I risked. I was like, I'm gonna risk losing this because
Right.
I
Right.
have to operate from my heart. And
Mhm.
from there, then that really just segued into me being radically honest with myself and realizing, wow, like I can't live this lifestyle anymore. Like alcohol has
Okay.
not brought me any real joy. Drugs don't bring me any real joy. These are my ways of escape. And so once I
Yeah.
admitted that to myself,
Hmm.
um, it it just it took off, because then my commitment was like, my commitments to my health, it's to my growth, it's to my
Yeah.
relationships and my
Yeah.
presence. And so then I just took to creating a daily practice where I read every day. I've been reading just a crazy amount of books,
All right.
meditating.
Yeah.
I was actually reading A Course in Miracles this morning.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
Yeah, it's a wonderful book,
Yes.
wonderful practice. And so I've just been really, and then physical exercise, just trying to keep all the facets of myself aligned.
Hmm.
And that really just was the foundation for me to expand further and uh, dive into myself more deeply.
Okay. Well, and as we mentioned at the outset, those of you listening in, this is a radical journey and massive transformation has taken place, clearly. So, and it's wonderful. Dylan, how long were you involved in the drinking and the drug world, or how long was that a part of your life?
It was about 10 years.
10 years.
I
Okay.
really, I didn't really, I mean, I had experimented a little bit as a teenager,
Okay.
but it didn't really stick. I was a pretty good kid, and
Hmm.
I actually, most of my refuge as a teen in my teen years was in music and like video games. But I mean,
Yeah.
I would say my affinity for addictive behavior started at a very early age, and that was in video games, even pornography.
Ah,
Um,
yeah.
and so I
Hmm.
definitely had dark addictive patterns from a very early age that I sought refuge in, and ran for myself in.
Okay.
But it wasn't until I was about 18, 19 that I really discovered drinking and narcotics. And I was like,
Okay.
oh my gosh, I can escape my feelings entirely. I can numb this pain. Even though it was only temporary, I became totally smitten. And as such, I was also really like, my favorite frontmen were the ones that were dead, like Kurt Cobain,
Uh-huh.
Jimi Hendrix,
Yeah.
Jim Morrison, which it's like they may have been good songwriters and artists, but they also, their darkness killed them. They let their dark sides kill them. Like,
Yeah.
so why am I,
Yes.
even writers, I would look up to Hunter S. Thompson. He's one of my favorite rock star writers, because he's
Right.
just, I mean, the guy was just out of his mind, but I
Yeah.
was like, he was so charismatic. And so I
Hmm.
was like, man, I just love that
Rockstar
persona.
writer. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just loved that persona, but it was
Yes.
like, the more I emulated it, the more I emulated the madness that came along with it and that pain. And I just, and persisted for a long time. And I definitely,
Mm-hmm.
um, I put myself in a lot of really bad situations pretty
Sure.
often. And
Yeah.
it definitely, I pushed my body's limits and my
Hmm.
mind's limits with a lot of my behaviors. Um,
Right. Well, and you mentioned the incidents that you had with your former partner that helped bring you out. Now, were there other experiences or incidences that helped facilitate that switch?
Oh, I mean, so there was the DUI, there was that, there was, I mean, for this big switch, those were the main two. Um, and
Okay.
then kind of over the past year, it's kind of just been making switches as I moved along. So
Mhm.
as more things, as I had a job that I had revisited where I was a DJ at a roller rink in Boise. And so,
Okay.
and I had worked there a few years prior. And, but recently, it became very clear to me. I was like, this does not fill my soul. So it has to go.
Mhm.
And once I closed that door, I mean, more doors opened. So it's
Yeah.
kind of been more of the
Yes.
more aware I become of, um, become aware, I've just become self-aware, the
Mhm.
easier it's become to kind of pick and choose things and let's go, like that
Right.
attachment and detachment game, and letting
Mhm.
things go and allowing more abundance and opportunity to flow
Okay.
in.
Yeah, and what would you say to people that are out there listening that may be going through something very similar? What is the most difficult part, do you find, about the ongoing journey of moving from addiction to sobriety?
Mm. Well, I would say there's a few things.
Mhm.
For me, so in my own transformation, it's kind of become a game for me of
Okay.
playing with, at least consciousness has, like in the idea of relinquishing identity. Like that is
Right.
so
Right.
fascinating to me. And the idea that like,
Mhm.
wow, like I'm really not anything I think I am. That's just what I think I am. But then at the same time, you get into the power of thoughts, I, I think, therefore I am, that whole kind of thing. So,
Right.
and that's the power of manifestation. Our
Yeah.
thoughts and perceptions really literally create reality. But when you get into like identification and you relinquish that identification with things, it really opens you up to who you truly are and who you truly are becoming. And so I guess what
Yes.
I would say is a big one for me too is the narrative. I got very interested in my own story and very
Okay.
attached to my own story of,
Right.
because a lot of us think, without my story, who am I?
Mhm.
Without this narrative, without my pain, who am I? And that was a hard thing for me to let go of, because as a child, my dad committed suicide when I was 6,
Okay.
and about 5 or 6 months later, I was molested by these older boys that lived down the street from me.
Mm. Mm.
And so at a very early age, I experienced not only a loss of a father figure,
Right.
um, and the example of what it is to be a man, but I also experienced this crippling guilt and shame, because even though like my experience with it, I had no idea what it was. Like it was just a thing that happened. But once the adults found out,
Mhm.
and my mom was like, and she meant well, she was trying to, doing her best to protect me. But
Right. Right.
for me, I took it as like, did I do something wrong? Am I like, so it's like the way that it was perceived by the outside world, I internalized that in a way that I just carried with me with shame and guilt. And that really attributed to my affinity for low self-worth, self-loathing, a lack of loving myself. And then, as I got older, um, got bullied in middle school,
Oh.
and
Mhm.
and I was always picking up the broken pieces of these men that were in and out of my life that were never, I never really, I developed a distrust for father figures at a very young age and
Uh,
authority.
okay.
So I pushed it away,
Yeah.
but that narrative only strengthened my affinity for addiction, because I was just like,
Mhm.
out of that pain, that was a wonderful excuse to be a victim. And so being a victim made it so much easier to,
Right.
well, they don't understand me. Fuck the world. Screw you guys. And,
Right.
but it didn't change anything. And until I started playing around with changing my perception. And once I started changing the way that I saw the events of my past, and going, instead of asking questions such as, why me? why did this happen to me, going, how can I
Yeah.
how is this making me grow more?
Hmm.
How is this a tool that I can use to relate to other human beings and open up that dialogue? Because it's like these, and I actually was talking to a friend recently. He's experienced a lot of loss in his life, and
Okay.
he kind of has been in that victim mindset. And I said to him, I go, you don't realize that you're sitting on gold.
Mm.
Like you're literally, all your pain and your loss that you have, you're sitting on gold, because you have now these immense tools of depth that you can relate with people who go, you wouldn't understand. Actually, it's quite the contrary.
Right.
Like I've experienced some really dark things, and maybe we
Yeah.
can have a conversation about this, and maybe
Hmm.
we can open up deeper avenues of healing.
Sure.
And so I would say to people, um, have the courage to detach from your narrative,
Okay.
and change your story, because it's like our past changes with who we are in the present. So like how you feeling, how you're
Yeah.
perceiving in this present moment actually changes the way you see your past. Like,
Yes.
and plus the past isn't even a real thing. It's gone. It doesn't exist anymore except for in here in our
Hmm.
minds.
Right.
So it's allowing yourself to be free of the past, um, be free of any attachment and anticipation for the future, and just
Hmm.
realize that you're creating both past and future from, they're like wakes coming out from now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, most definitely. Well, and then at what point did you begin to, as you say, start to play with perception, start to look at that differently?
I think that was, so that started pretty early on, and I actually got into that with psychedelics.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
probably at the age of 18 was when I
Okay.
first took mushrooms,
Mm.
psilocybin mushrooms, and
Hmm.
those were always my favorite, like with when it came to substances, because it was like
Okay.
it was always a very spiritual experience, a very and I love intellectual stuff, and
Right.
so it
Right.
always prompted a lot of healing and a lot of growth. And yeah, I think that was really what got me into it. And I don't remember where I became so fascinated in psychedelics. It was probably Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, if I'm being
Well,
entirely honest. Seeing that and being like, huh, like, and as a kid, you grow up and your school is like showing you videos like, this is acid and everything is cartoons, and you're like, is that really what it is? And you try it and you're like, oh, it's not like that at all. And
it's
so I
not a
think,
cartoon.
yeah, I'm like, oh, it's more just like 4K. Like, so yeah, so I think that's really where I got into playing with perception, was in psychedelics.
Okay.
And then it really took a turn when and I think I had talked about this in our last conversation as well, but when I was in rehab and my
Hmm.
counselor suggested the book The Untethered Soul.
Right.
And so once I read that book, that was just, that just cracked me open a little bit more. And from there, I really got into The Power of Now, A New Earth, um,
Okay.
The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment by
Mhm.
Thaddeus Golis, which is a super
Yeah.
cool little read.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, I just started really playing around with and reading more work from uh, just about consciousness and transformation and changing
Okay.
your perception and relinquishing structures, and
Hmm.
really just diving into that.
Yeah, I took a deep dive, and there's so many wonderful materials out there. So you mentioned just a few of all of the spiritual texts and books that are out there and available to people. And well, Dylan, here's a question for you: have you had any m- outstanding or noteworthy mentors or teachers on this journey?
Mm. Um, Well, Zot Baraka was a mentor to me for a brief time,
Okay.
because I was enrolled in his New Masculine program,
Ah, yeah.
and he was definitely, I would say he was the main reason I got into the masculine work to begin with. Um,
Hmm.
as for continued mentorship, uh, I can't really think of anyone outside of the authors of the books I read. Like I'm a
Okay.
huge fan of Don Miguel Ruiz.
No.
He's
Yeah.
definitely a teacher that I aim to emulate my perception and my ability to love after.
Hmm.
Deepak Chopra is another big one. Um,
Sure.
uh, Tony Robbins is one of my faves. Like I just
Hmm.
love that guy's energy, and Eckhart Tolle, and yeah, I would say just authors really, because I'm a bookworm. So
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm pretty solid. I'm a pretty solitary creature
Oh,
for the most
okay.
part. Like
All right.
in my DJ, like I mean, DJing is really the most I socialize, and I'm not even really socializing with people. But I feel
Right.
like it's the more that I've evolved, um, the harder it is for me to be in social situations where I don't care. Like, and that sounds really bad, but like,
Yeah.
cause it's like, I'm not the kind of person that I like go out to a party and I'm going to be like bouncing around all the people like, hey, what's going on? Like, I'm more of the guy
Right.
that sits by himself and just kind of people watches.
Sure.
And, then someone comes over and it's like, what's up, man? Do you want to go like do this? I'm like, I'm fine. I'm good. Like, you want to talk? Like we can sit and talk and like, how's your relationship with your parents? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
People can ask any kind of questions. Yeah, but I know
yeah.
what you mean. These are the kind of dialogues where it's just surface level, and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean you're clearly saying you like the ones that are a little bit more in depth. Right.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think that my taste for that really has come from because I used to be very surfaced. Especially like when I was
Hmm.
um like I really can't remember a lot of details over the past 10 years.
Okay.
Because I was just high and drunk all the time. And but then I mean there's all these cliques of people that I would kind of just bounce around. Like I would never really stay long enough to connect deeply because I was so
Right.
afraid hadn't connected with myself.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so now I find myself at this place where when that opportunity to kind of bounce around connecting with people on a surface level is there, I just don't really care for it because I'm like, I've done that and it didn't bring me any fulfillment. It didn't make me feel good, and so
Yeah.
I'd rather connect deeply with a few people and really dive deep down the rabbit hole than barely get to know a million people and not really experience any depth at all.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and I think that that is something that a lot of people that are going through a massive transformation or they've had periods of time like that in their lives, I think that they can completely relate to that. It's a common enough
Yeah.
experience. Yeah. Well, and so you mentioned a lot of books just a moment ago. What are you reading right now?
Ooh. So I just started picking up A Course in Miracles again today, but I had
Okay.
taken a little break from it because it's a a whole consciousness bender. It just
Yes.
but I was
Hmm.
getting and then I actually started reading For the Love of Men by Liz Sparks, and it's
Okay.
a new vision for mindful masculinity. It's a
Oh,
wonderful
all right.
read. So she basically travels the world interviewing men and in different cultures and
Ah.
addresses all these different areas of masculinity
Hmm.
where and it's just she there's a lot of research and data and studies which some people are very science based, and so in that regard it has the scientific research about idealized masculinity and actually
Right.
how detrimental it is and
Hmm.
how real of a thing it is. A lot of people are just like, oh yeah, that's not a thing. It's like, actually, like we can talk about it. I might change your mind.
Right. And let me show you the following
Yeah.
examples. Right. Yes. Yeah. Well, and speaking of that, how do you see that that playing out as being really detrimental? I mean, what's the number one thing that you see in your experience
Ooh.
about? Yeah.
So, I mean, I see it quite a bit
Hmm.
in out at the bar that I work at, and
Ah. Yeah. Yeah.
there will be, and I hear it a lot in language, a lot of, and because I become a lot more sensitive in my awareness to really paying attention to the vocabulary that people choose to use.
Okay. Yeah.
And so with men, hearing the way that they choose to talk about other men and choose to talk about women, I'll also pay a lot of attention to body language, so I can kind of
Right.
and facial expression.
Yeah.
But then on top of that, so I noticed this, and this still baffles me, is so it's out in Nampa, Idaho, and it's
Hmm.
so Nampa is kind of on the outskirts of Boise. It's one part of the Treasure Valley, but
Uh-huh.
it's a lot more of like an old school kind of country area, like blue collar, um, and so I'll be DJing, and I love fashion. I absolutely love it. Like I
All right.
love and people ask a lot of people ask me if I'm even from here. They don't think I'm from Boise because I'm like I'm lavish and I'm flamboyant and I'll wear like mint pants and like
No,
a
there you
cool
go.
button up and my loafers, and they're just
Hmm.
like a lot of men right off the bat will just be like, dude, that dude's totally gay.
Oh,
And which
yeah.
blows my mind that it's like,
Hmm.
because they can see that I'm in touch with my femininity, like that
Sure.
I am in touch with my feminine energy, and automatically for
Hmm.
them that is attributed to sexual orientation, which I find a
Yeah.
very interesting switch. Like it's a very interesting like bridging of the gap, um
Yeah.
and which I'm not. And so it always
Hmm.
baffles me to hear such a closed-minded thing. And I'm like, well, that's just, and there's that, a lot of, I noticed it a lot in misogyny. So I've become a lot more aware of
Hmm.
just, yeah, like I don't like locker room talk. I don't participate in it and I don't condone it. Um, and then also consent. Consent is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Whether it's dancing in a woman's space or persisting when a woman tells a guy like, "Hey, let me buy you a drink." No, I'm fine. No, well, like, and it's like, dude, she said no. That means when a person says no, unless she's being like, no, stop, no, I can't, no, then okay, maybe her
Right.
body language is telling you something different.
Sure.
But um, yeah. So I mean, I
Yeah.
kind of just the more aware, and then I become aware of it in myself too, like of my own programming. And then it's,
Hmm.
rocking my world. And so the more aware of it I'm becoming in myself, I'm becoming aware of it in others. And um, yeah. And so it's really uh and just seeing how afraid of intimacy men are, because men don't know how to be intimate,
Okay.
especially with other men. They don't know how to be intimate with brothers. We
Yeah.
kind of lost that in modern culture of
Yes.
that sense of community between brother,
Mhm.
human brothers and sisters.
Yeah, we really have, and I think you just touched on something that's really, really important is men are not socialized to be intimate. After a
Yeah.
certain point, it's pushed away, and we're socialized to run away from that. I mean, run far, far away
Yeah,
in men,
very
right?
far. Yeah.
Yes, in many cases. So, what do you suppose needs to happen for us to start to get that sense of intimacy, that sense of brotherhood back, because it's so important, as you just mentioned.
Ooh, well, so kind of how I've been approaching it all
Yeah.
is, because it is such an ingrained thing, and
Hmm.
it's not solely a systemic thing, even though our systems and our infrastructure certainly propagate it.
Sure.
um and so like it's not like we can just tear down the infrastructure, like even like, yeah, there's a lot of it that came from the colonialism and the patriarchy. There's a lot of it that came from that, but it's not the
Sure.
sole source. Same
Right.
as it's gender biased marketing and advertising is a thing. Why is that a thing? Well, we can't just do away with all marketing and advertising.
Hmm.
So it's like we can't just completely crumble everything down, which most people is kind of, and we see that a lot in the world right now, especially in the US. We're seeing like people are going, this system is bad. This system is the cause of this. So if whole thing needs to come crumbling down. When I'm seeing things a little differently, where this new spiritual revolution that we're seeing in humanity, this awakening, is not one of pointing the fingers and blaming the systems. Even it's taking personal accountability and responsibility for how we've played a part and going, how do
Yes.
I change myself? Because if every single human being in the world became radically honest with themselves and started saying,
Mhm.
you know what, I am afraid. If every man was like, wow, it has been ingrained in me from a young age that to be in tune with my emotions is a sissy thing. It's a pussy thing. It's
Yeah.
don't be like a girl, which where did
Hmm.
we ever learn that girls are like weak? Like a woman carries a baby in their body and pushes it out through their body. And then we're like, yeah,
Yes.
you're just a girl. And it's like,
Mm.
what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, have you ever
And
been hit by a woman when she's mad?
well, and
Mm-mm.
yeah, I've witnessed a woman giving birth on a couple of occasions,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, yeah, it's quite an amazing experience for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, this is really an interesting point that you make. This is a phrase that I think is a theme of our conversation, and that's radical self-honesty.
Yeah.
Yeah, being radically honest. So, what do you suppose stops people from going there? You know, why do you suppose people are so hesitant to really do that deeper work and be radically honest with themselves?
Ooh. Well, I think we're not really encouraged to do it at all in our culture,
Hmm.
first off. And so it would feel like to do it would be to be completely and utterly alone. And and we've also been just very engendered with these strange ideas of like this investment in this illusion that really, in my opinion, is like it's not the real deal. Like we're like
Yeah.
so invested in how things look instead of how it feels and instead of
Hmm.
how the experience of it is. And like
Hmm.
for me, that my real, being radically self-honest was, and I mean, we're all encouraged to believe in our own lies. And
Sure.
and for me, for a long time, and it's something I still notice coming up in my programming, is I've always perceived other people's perceptions of myself to be more real than my own in the
Oh, okay.
past. So
Ah,
like
yeah.
when someone would go, hey man, you know what? That really wasn't cool. All of a sudden I'm going, well, this person probably sees me better than I do because I don't even know. I don't even know what's going on inside me. Like maybe they see me better. But
Mm-hmm.
the more clear I've gotten and the more grounded I've gotten, now I'm like, thank you for sharing that with me. And like, I'll listen and I'll take it, but it doesn't mean I'm going to believe it. It doesn't mean I'm going to
Exactly.
believe you. Like, I'll listen and I'll learn from it, but I'm not going to believe you. Like,
Right.
I'm hardly going to even believe myself. I'm just here to listen and learn. Like, I
Hmm.
don't need to incorporate this into my belief system about who I am because that's going to change. It'll probably be different tomorrow.
Right. Well, yeah, and as we've talked about it, and it's likely to be. I mean, maybe in
Yeah.
5 minutes, you never know.
Right. Yeah. Even now, it's like we've talked about things over the past 28 minutes that uh, we didn't talk about before. So
Exactly.
we're
Yeah.
we're automatic. We're already different.
Mhm. But yep, already different one moment to the next. And it's
Yeah.
just so interesting when that is reality and that so many people and so many social systems are set up to deny that and fight against it. And yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's just that personal accountability piece is really, really huge. And that's obviously been a large part of your journey. And is there anything else that you'd like to say to our listeners about how how powerful it is to take that accountability? You know, how has that utterly transformed you?
It's it's almost like when you hold yourself personally accountable and you hold yourself responsible for everything that has happened in your life. Like granted,
Right.
life throws things at us. Life throws curveballs. But at
Hmm.
the same time, we make choices that sometimes put ourselves in the line of fire of such curveballs. And those curveballs aren't inherently thrown at us to hurt us. Sometimes they're thrown at us to wake us up. Sometimes
Yes.
and most of the time, because everything is always working out for each and every one of us. The universe is always conspiring in our favor for our own spiritual evolution and personal growth.
Hmm.
Um, for me, it was like being invested in this illusion or being convinced that you're blind and using that victim mindset, but all the while you just have your hands in front of your eyes. And then so personal
Right.
accountability is when you go, oh, I'm just these are my hands. I've been blinding myself this whole time.
Hmm.
I've been living under my own blind illusion. I've been basically choosing to put cataracts in my eyes every day. And when you become radically self-honest and hold yourself personally accountable for your life and your choices and your feelings and your thoughts and your relationships, then
Yeah.
that's you taking the cataracts out and choosing to see clearly and take a different approach.
Yes, exactly. And in your bio, Dylan, you mentioned sharing your story, which we've shared a part of today, and I really appreciate that. I know that
Yeah.
there are a lot of people out there that can relate to that, but you also talk about your mission, and I'm wondering if you could say a few words about that, your mission here.
My mission is really because in my journey, I've realized how powerful I am as a spiritual being having a human experience
Right.
and I mean that comes into my ability to love unconditionally, my ability to listen without being obsessed with my own response, my ability to hold space for people that are in
Hmm.
pain, my ability to transform my life in less than a year, to go
Yeah.
from being drunk and out of shape and high on coke, and
Mm.
then less than a year later my life is flooded with abundance and opportunities, and I'm nowhere near where I was. I can't even
Hmm.
like fathom that same mindset. And
Yeah.
so I would say my mission is to inspire people and remind them of how powerful they really are, and like how powerful their choices are.
Hmm.
Um, and I do that through like I don't bother with small talk really. So when people
Yeah.
when I meet people and they start talking to me, I will just jump right in where I'll just be like, "Well, how does that make you feel?"
Hmm.
"Well, why do you do that? Like, does that bring you joy?" And all of a sudden they're like, "Shit, this guy's asking like yeah, he's asking real questions like
Yeah.
and he's
Whoa.
actually
Like,
sitting here
whoa.
like yeah, he's sitting here looking at me like he wants to actually know." Like and so by doing that, I'm like I
Yes.
just because we've been convinced that we're not special. We've been convinced that we're not that powerful. I just work my job and, well,
Hmm.
this is what you do. And it's like, but is it? Does it have to be? What if it could be anything you want it to be? What if you could be anything you want to be? What if you could live the life that you've always dreamed of that you think, I wish I could do that? Because you can. And it
Yes.
comes down to, so really providing people not only with the inspiration, but then I think this is what drives me to continue in my own self-education is once I can open up that dialogue and they go, okay, you have my attention, then I can share tools and devices and,
Yeah.
neurological practices and be like, hey, why don't you try this? I want you to go ahead. And honestly, too, I receive them in downloads too, where I'll just be going
Mhm.
and all of a sudden in that moment, I'll get an entirely new approach or an original device to use, and I'll be like, hey, you know what, I just thought of this, why don't you try this? And then they're like, oh, okay. And then they'll go try it and be like, dude, like since I met you, like this has changed and I've done this and I've done that, and man, you just really have like just that you
All
said this
right.
one thing. And so I would say that that's like my mission is just to I'm not going to wake up humanity is going to wake up themselves, but if I can
Yeah.
prove to
Yeah.
and actually I was reading the Gene Keys recently. I did my Gene Key profile,
Okay.
and it said that my purpose is my purpose is to be an example to others by being one who lives with purpose.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
um
Yeah.
and that very much rang true because that is very much how I live is I live with um I always practice seeing the divine in everything, seeing everyone as a reflection of me. And if
Yeah.
it's more of a negative interaction, well, how is this something that I need to heal within myself? How did I attract this person in this conversation? What is this person mirroring to me?
Right.
um and then and just seeing God in everything,
Okay. Yeah.
and not in a politically Judeo-Christian sense, but
Sure.
like
Right.
the essence of God, the essence of
Mm.
Brahman,
Right.
a soul, and
Yeah.
seeing that in everything, feeling it in everything, and allowing it to flow into everything I do,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
just for the sake of just because it feels that much better and it feels that much more real. And um, I used to not be very happy at all. Even my mother has told me, she's like, I have never in my life, and I'm I'll be 30 next year.
Okay.
And she has told me, I've nehere seen you smile this big and this much ever in your whole life. So it's like, I've
Ah.
almost been on this planet I've almost been here for, what is that, 2-3 decades?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, 3 decades. And I haven't smiled as, this is the first time I've smiled this much and this often.
All
So,
right. Well,
yeah,
that
I would say
that's good.
yeah. I really love humor. I love humor. And so I
Yes.
love,
Yes.
I would say that's also one of my tools is like,
I love it.
and kind of one of my archetypes. I actually was one of my friends recently. She was like, you just have this, like, I've been like, sometimes I feel like I have multiple personality disorder because I just have so many characters that I'll like allow to flow through me. And,
perfect. All right.
she was like, no, it's multiple personality order. And I'm like, oh, okay. I like that. But, I'll just, and I think one of my archetypes is kind of that mischievous. I'm like I like mischief. I like causing a ruckus. I like making people laugh. I like stirring things up. And,
Right.
and it's a wonderful segue as well to, get into that deep conversation, because you get people's attention by making them laugh. You make them smile, and all of a sudden they're
Yes.
vulnerable. And now they're vulnerable. And now it's like, hey, like,
Right.
I'm human, you're human. Look how beautiful this is. And they're like, this is like kind of vulnerable and intimate. He's right. Like, how am I supposed to feel about this? But then I'm like sitting there totally naked, smiling and laughing. And they're like, well, if he can feel this way, I can too. And so I really just, I try to exude this presence of like me being so confident and comfortable in who I am,
right.
That's just a safe space. People get into my space and they automatically can feel safe in being their weird full selves that they may not feel like they can that they can reveal with other people, but with me they feel like they can be who they really are. And that's really what I strive to
okay. Yeah, I love that. It's like people need permission to be able to go there almost. And it's wonderful that you can give that to them. And there are people that can. And laughter is a beautiful part of medicine, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's quite wonderful. Well, Dylan, so how can people get a hold of you if they wanted to find out more about how to work with you, for example, or contact you? How would they reach you?
Yeah. So the two best ways with the World Wide Web would be email, which would be D Olson H, which is DOLSONH at gmail.com.
Okay.
And or Facebook, which my handle on Facebook is just Dylan Hunter Olson. And
perfect.
And then they could, keep tabs on all the developments. Yeah, and I mean, things are rapidly changing, as you and I are.
Yes,
so,
they are.
There's, new platform, the iAwesome that is coming up. And so I don't, in the future, I'm sure there will be, ways for them to get a hold of me with that as well. But on a more personal level, if they feel called to reach out, the two, Facebook and email, would certainly be the best for now.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And then again, for the listeners, the email address is dolsonh at gmail.com, DOLSONH at gmail.com. And well, let's spend a minute talking about iAwesome.
Yeah.
Yes, for the listeners, complete full disclosure, Dylan and I are both involved on the council of iAwesome, meaning we're helping build it. Dylan, what does this mean to you? What does this platform mean to you? And what is it actually as well for the listeners? Yeah.
So iAwesome is the International Academy of Universal Self-Mastery, which we Tomas touched on in my little blurb at the beginning that we're both involved with. But that is basically it's an online learning and social platform built for students and their teachers, built for students to have a very intimate and connected learning experience where they can not only connect with their teachers and ask quality questions and receive quality answers and have that really fruitful relationship, but they can also build those relationships with other students. And on top of the relationships, they're also provided with an ample amount of resources and the
Right.
environment to be resourceful, where
Yes.
they can, they can access podcasts, they can access
Hmm.
meditations, they can access just, a whole variety of things. Um,
Yeah.
and so for me, it was really an answering to a question, because I had been wanting that, I've been like, man, I want an outlet to do my mentorship and my teaching. And I want somewhere where I can not only pour my knowledge into and my wisdom, but that will, like, it'll create that circle where it'll, prompt me to be more self-educated, like
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
it's gonna encourage me to, I'm not just gonna be pouring, it won't be exhausting, it'll be a
Mhm.
relationship where I'm pouring myself into it, and then I go, oh crap, I don't know this as well as I thought I did. And then I'll start reading and I'll start taking other people's courses. Plus the fact that we're going to be involved on a platform where it's like, I can learn energy healing, I can learn money mastery, I can learn like all shamanic meditations and
Hmm.
yoga. I'm like, dude, I'm going to be, I'm going to be dead broke because I'm going to be spending all my money on courses.
Yes. Yeah, I can relate to that as one who interviews the incoming faculty. I want to take everyone's course. And again, guys, this those of you out there listening, you're wondering a little bit more about this. It's the International Academy of Universal Self-Mastery, and the acronym is beautiful and we love it. It's IAWSM. IAUSM, and the website, which is up and operational here, you
Oh,
can
is it?
visit it,
Oh,
is, well, yes, and we're uploading courses. We're launching in the fall, but you can access the website and sign up for our newsletter at this point. We're
yes.
launching the academy, the online academy, in October, but the website address is IAUSM.com. IAUSM.com for iAwesome. Sign up for the newsletter. That you can do right now, and there will be hundreds. We're up to 150 faculty members right now from all
Wow.
over the world. So, and well, Dylan, you're one of them. I'm
Yeah.
one of them. Yeah, this is going to be fun. It's a fun journey. So I'm glad we got a few minutes to
It
talk
really
about
is.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And on top of that newsletter, that's created by yours truly and our creative
Yes, it
emissary
is.
team. So, so if you guys want to get over to iAwesome and, subscribe to that newsletter, and yeah, we got some good content for you guys.
We do, and Dylan's a phenomenal writer, guys. We're experiencing some of this here on the show, which is really wonderful. And Dylan, this has been a lot of fun and
This has
very
been.
revealing. And I really, really appreciate you taking the time to join us here today on Decide to Transform.
Yeah.
Anything else that you'd like to say to our listeners before we wrap up here?
Oh, I would just say, just all right. I got a couple of things.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, a cool meditation that is more of, it's not a sit down meditation. This is a meditation you take and you chew on throughout the day. But I would encourage my listeners to, or our listeners to, live the day like a lifetime. So when you
Hmm.
wake, you are born. When you awaken, you are born, and you are new. You are fresh, and um, you are going to feel every spectrum of emotion, every color. You're going to taste and smell things. And I encourage you to go
Okay.
throughout the day as if it's the first time you're experiencing everything. So experiencing everything with awe and wonder
All
and
right.
excitement and exuberance. And then as you get closer to the end of the day and you're laying down to go to bed and your head is laying on your pillow and you're looking up at the strange patterns on the ceiling, I encourage you to go to sleep with the mindset that you are not going to wake up. And as such, you will, and being aware of this throughout the day. So while you're also experiencing everything with awe and wonder,
Hmm.
experiencing everything with gratitude, because you're experiencing it as if it's not only the first time you're experiencing it, but it's also the last time. So you're going to
Okay.
savor and be grateful, and then
Yes.
go to sleep and
Hmm.
see if you, and really pay attention with your awareness to your sense of fulfillment.
Okay.
Do you feel fulfilled? Do you go to sleep fast? Are you afraid and it makes you stay up a little longer because
Sure.
you're afraid of letting go? And
Uh,
pay attention to these things. And it's just a fun practice if you really want to start developing self-awareness and start really paying attention in life. And not because you'll not only pay more attention to your external surroundings, but also your internal environment. You'll pay
Right.
attention to what triggers your fear and what things really bring out joy and love and what things you want to give more attention to.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so with that, I would just say live fearlessly and love recklessly. Because what's the worst thing that can happen? What, you're going to get your heart broken? Like, you haven't been heartbroken before. Like, get back up on that horse.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
yeah, like, act a fool. Get love drunk.
Yes.
Live wildly. Like, and not wildly in a inherently destructive sense, but wildly in the
Yeah.
sense that what do you have to lose
Right.
other than to live? Like, just,
Yeah.
I always like to say, like, the worst thing that can happen is you can die, and that's not even the worst thing that can happen, because it's like there's some people that will
No.
live their whole lives dead spiritually, and they
Yeah.
just, so it's like you lived 80 years miserable. Is that how
Hmm.
you want to live 80 years? Like, no, man. Just, and I'm not saying, be reckless to where, like, I lived 30 great years, but I, died because I was dumb. I'm like, no, like, really feel into it.
Yeah.
Like, live fearless. Like, and not in the sense that I don't feel any fear. It's like, even in the face of fear, you
Yeah.
acknowledge your fear and go, oh, I see you, fear. Like,
Hmm.
I see
Right.
you, I feel you, but I'm still going to choose this because
Yes.
I'm committed to love. I'm committed to growth.
Love
I'm
it.
committed to life.
Yeah, committed to life, to love, to growth. I love those. All right. So this is fabulous advice. So I know that everybody's stuck around for this. And yeah, and this show is going to be available wherever you listen to podcasts. And Dylan, this has been a real pleasure. Thank you so
This,
much for joining me.
yeah, thank you for having me. This has been great joy.
I love it. I love it. All right, guys, this has been Dylan Hunter Olson, and this is Decide to Transform. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you again here soon.
Thanks for tuning in.